betrayed.
So, just to recap, this was the invasion on 2014 of Crimea. The West allowed it to take place. The West didn't do anything about it for several years afterwards, which made Putin very hungry to take the rest of the Ukraine. What could the West have done, which was your first point before the break? And that is not a lot. They could have made all sorts of noises and all sorts of threats to say that there will be sanctions, don't do it. And then if you remember a few days beforehand, the Americans very much through their intelligence were saying this is imminent, it's going to happen. They gave a specific day and a time that the invasion was going to take place. I was still very skeptical, along with other people, because I thought maybe they would go into the Donbass region and to the south, but not to the entire country. It's exactly what took place. The Americans and the British, of course, couldn't make a preempted strike against the Russians because they weren't actually in the country at the time, in Ukraine. So that would have been bad news, I think, for the entire world, for the Americans to have attacked Russia inside of Russia.
But what about prior to that? I mean, what about, I'm talking about sort of 2000. I'm talking about when Putin was perhaps more open to becoming a part of NATO and a part of the West.
And we thought he was. We thought very much so that this is a man to do business with, to use the words of Mrs. Thatcher with regard to Gorbachev.
Oh, you'll never go wrong using the words of Mrs. Thatcher on this programme. Never, never, never.
But something has changed with Putin over the last few years. And Putin always said, and I was going to bring this up with regard to the funeral of Gorbachev yesterday, even though he died on Tuesday night, that the newspapers are still covering it. But Putin always said that the greatest defeat of Russia was the fall of the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was very much respected around the world. It was very much feared around the world. And that was what the Russians held by. I mean, I grew up under the USSR. And we were pretty scared about the possibility of nuclear weapons. But nevertheless, comes along Gorbachev, and he perhaps saved thousands, maybe tens of, perhaps even hundreds of thousands of lives. How is that possible? Because when the proxy governments of Czechoslovakia and Germany and Poland and Hungary and many other countries, the people started to rise up against the proxy governments in those countries, Gorbachev could have easily said, right, send in the Soviet troops, kill them all, which is exactly what Bashar al-Assad did in Syria when they started to demonstrate. And he said no. And years later, in the interviews, he said, I was trying to avoid bloodshed. And we have to be very thankful for that, because he saved all of those lives.
Absolutely, but I think